The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all. This is the X Zone, and I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Simul Radio, Simul TV, and iHeartRadio. Now, if you'd like to send an email, it's very simple, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And if you would like to find out about the other programming we have available for you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and for all the programming on Simul TV and the X Zone channel, the X Zone TV channel, visit www.simultv.com. It's a long weekend. It is Canada Day weekend. To all our Canadian listeners, have a very happy holiday. It's supposed to be very hot, so please watch your pets, watch your children, make sure you have plenty of water, and please, if you drink, do not drive. My first guest tonight, X Zone Nation, is Dr. Walter Semkiw. He is a Board Certified Occupational Medicine physician who has served as Assistant Chief of Occupational Medicine at a major medical center in San Francisco. Previously, he served as a medical director for Unocal 76, a Fortune 500 oil company. Walter embarked on reincarnation research in 1995 and is the author of Return of the Revolutionaries, The Case for Reincarnation and Soul Groups Reunited, which was published in 2003. In this book, a cohort reincarnated from the time of the American Revolution is identified. Former President Bill Clinton wrote, "Regarding revolutionaries, it looks fascinating," and neurosurgeon Norm Shealy, who is an MD, PhD, wrote, "For the survival of humanity, this is the most important book written in 2,000 years. Joining me now is Dr. Walter Semkiw. And Doctor, welcome back to the X Zone. It's been a long time. I'm looking forward to sharing this hour with you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Where did your interest in reincarnation come from, sir?
Well, actually, it started by investigating a possible past lifetime of my own. What happened is I was doing my residency in occupational medicine in Chicago, and a friend of mine said she had went to see a medium or a psychic at a local bookstore and that I should go. And this was a trance medium, meaning that the individual goes into a meditative state and then allows a spirit being or different spirit beings or spirit guides to communicate through the trance medium. And at the time, I didn't really believe in psychics or mediums, but it was winter in Chicago, and I didn't have much else to do but study, and so I went thinking at least it might be entertaining. And at the beginning of the session, this first spirit guide came through and said that he was the spirit guide given to those who have come into the world to make a statement, and that was about it. Then a second guide came through and gave me more detailed information and seemed to know things about my family life that I couldn't understand how this person could know this. So it got my attention. Then I was told about two past lives, one during the time of the American Revolution, and one during the time of Louis XIV. And the session went on, and I asked all the important questions, like, when am I going to find a girlfriend? And at the end, they asked me, the guide asked me, do I have any questions? So I asked, well, can I know who I was in the American Revolution? And he told me that I was somebody who signed my name on parchment to secure ideals for humanity. And he said that if I looked up John Adams, I would see myself in personality and physical attributes. And at first, I didn't think they meant that I was John Adams. So I said, I thought they meant I knew John Adams. And if I researched John Adams, I'd recognize myself around him. But they said that I was John Adams. Well, you know, I had heard that psychics tell you you're somebody famous in the past. And, you know, I was in medicine, not politics, and I just thought it was ridiculous. And I really didn't do anything about it for 12 years. And in the interim, another interesting thing is, even though I did not tell the spirit guides anything, the medium anything about me,
right?
The spirit guide also said that he saw me as a physician in a corporate position. And at the time, I was in training in occupational medicine, and most jobs are clinical, not corporate. And you either go into academia or clinical medicine or corporate medicine, and I indeed ended up being a corporate medical director. But still, you know, I didn't do anything for 12 years after the reading. And I was working for Unocal. It was in November of 1995, and I went on a business trip to Hawaii, which was part of my territory. And I met with the managers there, and we were going to go out to lunch, and they said, let's meet out in the parking lot. And so I did that, and I was the first one there, and I was just waiting for the others. And out of the blue, and I mean, this is like noontime, I'm standing up, it's broad daylight, and this booming voice in my head said, study the lifetime of Adams. And it was really like there was a megaphone inside my skull. It was that loud and powerful. And nothing like that ever happened to me before, and it's never happened since.
Wow.
But it got my attention. And so that night I went to the Borders bookstore in Honolulu and got books on Adams and the Revolution. And over time I started, first of all, I realized in some portraits, particularly the portrait done at the Paris Peace Conference that ended the Revolutionary War, I look exactly like him. And I also noticed that, I mean, his personality traits were identical, the same strengths, the same faults. And then I started to recognize all these people in his life who seemed to be reincarnated around me in my life. And so I kind of worked on this hypothesis for several years. And, you know, I was afraid to say anything about it because, you know, I didn't want people to think I'm crazy, you know, and I didn't want to lose my job if, you know, I'm running around saying I was John Adams.
Well, certainly,
I'm not. Yeah. But on the other hand, I realized that if this was true, it really gave insight to how reincarnation works, namely that facial features, personality traits, and relationships can remain consistent from one lifetime to another. And it wasn't really until 2001 that I gain more confidence about that, and it involved meeting Kevin Ryerson, who's the trance medium that's worked with Shirley MacLaine for 40 years, and Kevin is featured in 4 of her books and in her movie Out on a Limb. And I had been meeting with different psychics trying to sort out this reincarnation case of mine, the proposed case, to see if anybody could make accurate past life matches. And I didn't find anybody who I thought could until I met Kevin. And Kevin channels a spirit guide named Atun Ray, and I've worked with Kevin now since 2001, and I've worked with Atun Ray, the spirit guide, since that time on a monthly basis or more. So I have very extensive experience with Atun Ray.
All right, Walter.
He has a completely different personality than Kevin.
All right, Walter, we're going to have to take our break here. Please stand by. We've got a bit of a cliffhanger. Exonation, my guest this hour is Dr. Walter Semkiw. His website is www.reincarnationresearch.com. And the good doctor and I will be back discussing reincarnation this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, to all our Canadian listeners, wherever you are on this great, big, beautiful planet of ours, happy Canada Day. Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. We're broadcasting high atop the escarpment overlooking Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, in the province of Ontario. This is Canada Day weekend, so to one and all, happy Canada Day. My guest this hour is Walter Semkiw. He is a medical doctor. His website is www.reincarnationresearch.com, and we're discussing evidence of reincarnation this hour here in the X Zone. All right, sorry I had to do a bit of a cliffhanger with you, Doctor. We had to get into that commercial break, so please continue, sir.
Okay. So when I met Kevin, I asked about the cases that I had already compiled, and but I still didn't know whether I could trust Kevin and Atun Ray to make accurate matches. I mean, Atun Ray confirmed I was Adams, but how did I know that Atun Ray is accurate? What happened is over time, I started to go to him with cases where I had no hypothesis about a past lifetime. It's easy to go to a medium or psychic and say, was I, Caesar or Cleopatra? Sure. And the psychic can say yes or no. You don't really know if it's true or not still. But I asked about cases where I didn't have a proposed match. And one of the better cases involves Ralph Nader. And I had identified Al Gore, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, all the candidates in the 2000 election cycle, and Nader was one of them, but I couldn't figure out who Nader could have been in the revolution. And Atun Ray told me that he was a major player in the Continental Congress, and I asked, and he said, if I find him, you'll see he has the same sharp, angular face. And I asked, what was the name? And he said, Thompson. Well, that's very specific information.
Yes.
But in all my books, I could not find a Thompson. And it wasn't until I went to the library in San Francisco and went through every book that they had on the American Revolution, just looking in the indices for a Thompson. Finally, in this big book, published in 1935, I see Thompson in the index, portrait of Thompson. I go to the page, and it's a dead ringer for Ralph Nader. And then now that I had the name, his name was Charles Thompson, I was able to get more information. And Thompson and Nader had the very same pattern of thinking. They wrote the same. They wrote on the same topics. They were both advocates for the underdog, for Native Americans. And you might wonder why and Thompson was the secretary of the Continental Congress for the full 13 years of its existence. You might wonder, then why didn't he become a representative himself?
That's a good question.
That's why he was hard to find, because he was not an elected delegate to the Continental Congress. So the reason that the history book said that Thompson couldn't get elected is he was too liberal, which is the exact same trait, regarding Ralph Nader. So that, and many other cases, gave me confidence that Atun Ray had this ability to make accurate past life matches, which, made me feel comfortable going forward in publishing my first book, Return of the Revolutionaries.
Let me ask you this, Doctor.
Yeah.
When you were getting the information from Atun Ray, were you getting it directly from the spirit, or was it going through the medium?
Oh, directly from the spirit. And as I mentioned, Atun Ray has a totally different personality. He has a totally different voice. It's a very deep bass voice.
Right.
He speaks with an Egyptian accent. He says the last time that he incarnated was 3,500 years ago in ancient Egypt. And he is the most intelligent being I have ever interacted with. And, being in medicine, I've been around smart people all my life.
Yes.
And nobody I have found he has literally an encyclopedic scope of knowledge. And he's also very compassionate and very funny. He's very lighthearted. And in fact, I consider him, as well as Kevin, my best friends. It's kind of weird to say. My wife always says I shouldn't say this, but honestly, one of my best friends is a discarnate spirit, I've developed a very strong friendship with him.
Let me ask you this, Doctor. As a medical doctor, how do you explain the physiology and the reality of reincarnation?
Well, we don't know exactly how it works, but the way I believe it works is the soul projects a energy template into the developing fetus, and that energy template shapes the bone structure. What seems to remain the most consistent from lifetime to lifetime is the facial architecture or bone structure of the face. And in the same way, through this energy template or energy link, the soul can download information. And one thing that we see in reincarnation cases is that talents can come through very strongly, and in fact, many child prodigy cases can be explained through reincarnation. And one thing I do want to emphasize is that though this is how I got my start in reincarnation research, in the end run, to me, what's most important is I became a scholar on evidence of reincarnation. And I generally don't even tell the Adam story much because, I know people are going to be suspicious anytime a particular person says they were somebody in history,
Right.
which I totally understand.
Well, let me ask you this then, Doctor. If you are the reincarnation of John Adams, who is John Adams the reincarnation of?
Oh, well, through my work with Kevin Ryerson, I tracked a whole number of past lifetimes, but the one that probably is people may know about was I had a lifetime apparently as a minister under. Oh, I mentioned that they told me I was lived in the era of Louis the 14th. Well, eventually, I identified that lifetime as a man named Colbert, who was the economics minister under Louis. So my lives in general have been either in politics or in religious organizations in ways to impact society. And though it may at first glance seem odd that, I'd like this doctor into reincarnation, and how is there a continuity from the Adams lifetime? But to me, it's very clear. One of the very most important things about reincarnation research, and including cases studied by Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, is that souls can change religion, nationality, and ethnic affiliation from one lifetime to another. And later, if we have time, a dramatic case in this regard is the reincarnation of Anne Frank. But, the whole American Revolution was about creating political democracy. And what I see evidence of reincarnation creating is spiritual democracy. Most wars and conflicts are based on differences in what I call these cultural markers of identity, such as religion and nationality. And when people realize you can change nationality and religion from lifetime to lifetime, people will stop fighting about it. And really that's the reason I'm passionate about this. And on the reincarnationresearch.com website, independently researched cases are cataloged by what I call principles of reincarnation. So I mentioned facial features can be the same from lifetime to lifetime. So on the website, on the left side, you'll see something that says physical resemblances. And then you'll see all the independent cases that show facial similarity. And there's also a section on change of nationality and religion and ethnicity. And there's all the independently researched cases, including many from the University of Virginia, that show that these cultural factors can change. So really, my passion is to get this information out so people are aware of it. Unfortunately, very few people here in the West know about reincarnation research because, one, Ian Stevenson, who's the father, really, of evidence of reincarnation, wrote in a very difficult academic style.
All right, please stand by, Doctor. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Dr. Walter Semkiw, and we're going to be continuing talking about reincarnation this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios high atop the escarpment in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, to all our Canadian listeners, happy Canada Day. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking to Walter Semkiw about evidence of reincarnation this hour here in the X Zone. His website is www.reincarnationresearch.com. Besides the physical similarities, are there any other more in-depth similarities or connections that we can actually attribute to and further proving that reincarnation is real? For example, DNA, fingerprints, blood type.
None of those biometrics have yet entered into the arena of reincarnation research. It's just been too hard to do thus far. But that can change in the future. When biological samples are more readily available over time. And it's kind of a parallel issue of why facial resemblance was not detected sooner. Ian Stevenson, I was saying, is the father of evidence of reincarnation. He studied young children who had spontaneous past life memories that could be objectively validated. And the typical Ian Stevenson case is, as soon as a child can speak, that child starts to talk about a prior lifetime. And they tell the biologic parents that, you're not my real parents are going to come and get me, this is not my real home, and my name is not what you're calling me, my name is really another name from the past lifetime. And the child gives the biologic parents enough information, such as names, locations of where they lived, and so forth, that the biologic family can actually identify or find the past life family. And then the child is reunited with the past life family members, and the child can identify these people who they've never met before by name and relationship, and know things nobody outside the immediate family would know. And because of this, the past life family will accept the child as the reincarnation of their deceased loved one. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You know, Doctor, I know there's circumstantial evidence to support reincarnation, but what about the
photographs? So Stevenson started his research back in 1960, but he never published anything about people looking the same until 1997.
Why?
Because he did not have the photographs. Many of the cases that he studied were in Asia, in poor villages, in India, where people didn't have cameras. And so he was not able to compare images from the past lifetime to the current incarnation. And that changed, or kind of the first break for him came when he researched two cases back in the 1960s and early 1970s. There were two cases from Lebanon involving a woman named Suzanne Ghanem and a man named Daniel Jurdy. And they were classical Ian Stevenson cases like I just described. Well, Stevenson then went to revisit them in 1997 or so. And, it was more in, that's right, 1997. And now Daniel and Suzanne were full-grown adults. 25 years had gone by. And now he had a picture of them as adults. Remember, he studied these two people when they were little children.
Sure.
But at this point, he had took pictures of them as adults, compared them with pictures of who they were in the past lifetime, and they're exactly the same. Another case that shows this, it's the most important reincarnation case in America. It involves James Leininger, who, when he was a little child, had terrible nightmares that he was dying in a plane crash. And he gave enough information for his father to investigate his claims, the facts that he told his father. And again, this is like a 3-4-year-old boy who is telling his father that he flew off a ship called the Natoma. He remembered, the types of planes and aircraft, both American and Japanese. And his parents knew he wasn't learning this from watching Sesame Street. Well, his father eventually was able to research and identify the specific aviator who died in World War II, who was the past life for his son.
But what do we know about the parents? What do we know about the parents? Here you've got a 3-year-old child talking to a parent, describing all these different scenarios, describing the aircraft carrier, describing the plane, having these dreams. What do we know about the parents? Is there any way that the parents could have influenced the child and been part of a ruse, a fraud?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, first of all, his father was an evangelical Christian.
So?
And he even belonged to an evangelical Christian businessman's association.
All right.
So, reincarnation was not on his radar at all. And really, for his son to talk about this past life so convincingly, it required him to basically give up his belief system that he had for his entire life. And I know his father, Bruce Leininger, and I mean, there's no way that they concocted this. But the point that I was getting to is we started to follow this case when it first came out in 2005. That's when it was featured on ABC Primetime. And at the time, I predicted that when James grows up, he's going to look just like who he was in the past life. And in the past lifetime, by the way, his name was James Houston. And so we've been watching this over the last, 12, 13 years. And James was born in 1998. It's 2018. He's now 20 years old. And he has the exact same face as James Houston.
Let me ask you this, Doctor. Let me interject here and ask you a couple of questions. Number one, how come not everyone has been reincarnated into someone else who can be identified?
Well, first of all, most people don't have memories of past lives.
Why not?
And to identify somebody in history, you have to have left a historic record. But actually, I'm not quite sure what your question is.
My question is, if reincarnation is occurring with the cases that you've cited tonight, why are there not more cases being cited? Why is it not the guy down the street from where I live who has been reincarnated as from somebody very important in history? We know that there are doubles, people lookalikes. There's a lookalike for President, Nixon that was on TV. There was a lookalike for President Clinton, and so on and so forth.
So first of all, the facial resemblance by itself means nothing.
Right.
Just because you look like somebody in the past doesn't mean that you were that person.
Right.
These cases are arising the other way around, where people, and the strongest cases, admittedly, are from the University of Virginia, the childhood memory past life cases. And Stevenson documented 1,200 validated past life cases involving children, and none of them were famous. And so, this facial resemblance observation is coming from the other way around, where people have remembered their past incarnations, and then later when it was researched, we see that they have similar facial features and personality traits. You're basically the same person, but you reincarnate in different circumstances. And the way life works is very few people have spontaneous memories of past lives. They did a study in India where reincarnation is accepted, and they came up with a number that only 1 in 500 children talks about a past lifetime.
All right, Doctor, I've got to take my final break. Please stand by, and we'll get back to wrapping up this hour when we come back from this commercial break. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Tell me, are you a believer or a skeptic when it comes to reincarnation? Send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and we'll post the results of the poll that we're going to be taking on our next TV show next week. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And Dr. Semkiw and I will be back on the other side of this break, talking more and wrapping up this hour about reincarnation. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about reincarnation this hour with our guest, Walter Semkiw. He is a medical doctor. His website is reincarnationresearch.com. Walter, how do you explain, once again, you're a doctor. You're a medical doctor. You've been working as a doctor all these years. How do you explain, once again, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before, the physiology behind reincarnation?
Well, I can tell you what how I envision that it works, and I was telling you I believe the soul sends an imprint or an energy template, which the facial bones shape around. Why we look similar from one lifetime to another, that I can't explain. It seems like that's just the way God did it. And that's the best answer I can give you.
All right, what about the scientific community? Are there any true hardcore scientific investigations into the reincarnation phenomenon besides the University of Virginia?
Yes, there are other academics who have done this. There's a professor in Iceland by the name of Dr. Haraldson, and he just came out with a book recently called I Saw a Light and Came Here, and his cases are basically similar to Ian Stevenson's, and I've been putting up a number of his cases up on our website. You know, the thing that I would recommend the most to people is to, for themselves, look at the cases that are on the website. That's why I'm building it, because the detail of the cases, particularly the detail that young children come up with regarding their past lives, is incredible. And there are a couple of reasons why people don't know about these cases. One, Ian Stevenson himself shunned the media, and he didn't want to do interviews and all that. Jim Tucker is another academic psychiatrist who has taken over for him, And Dr. Tucker has written a couple of his own books, and he's continuing the work at the University of Virginia. He is more open to talking to the media. Stevenson's case reports were written for academia, so they're very detailed and difficult to follow sometimes. So I have rewritten his cases in kind of an easy story form so people can experience the cases themselves.
Sure.
Because I can talk till I'm blue in the face, and it won't necessarily convince people. But if you take time to actually look at the cases on the website, I don't see how anybody can walk away and not believe in reincarnation.
All right, at the end of the day, how will reincarnation make this a better world?
That's my whole point. Reincarnation research shows that we can change religion, nationality, and ethnic affiliation.
Okay.
And one of the most dramatic cases is the reincarnation of Anne Frank. And if you like, I could talk about that case briefly.
Well, before we get to talking about Anne Frank, I understand how you believe that reincarnation can change a person's belief. They can change this, that, and the other thing. But how does that help the world today? How does that help the sick, the hungry, the poor, the unemployed, the homeless?
Well, reincarnation is not going to set up a social welfare system by itself, but it's going to, one, give people a different perspective on life, that it's not a one-time shot, and that what you do in this life is going to affect your future incarnations, because karma is real. And it will make people care more about each other, and also have more care for poor populations, because we will realize that we could incarnate in that population that's impoverished, that doesn't have sanitary facilities and so forth. It also, it automatically makes you a spiritual person. Most people really don't know what happens to them when they die. And there's a big difference between believing in reincarnation and knowing reincarnation exists.
But if reincarnation is valid, how come it's not talked about in the Bible?
Well, actually, there was information on reincarnation both in the Old Testament and New Testament, but it was taken out by a Roman emperor named Justinian in the 6th century. But you make a very good point, and that's another reason why people don't know about reincarnation research, is because we live in a Judeo-Christian society, and the organized religions here are not going to touch it because it will undermine their organizations.
So why is it the poorer religions, or the religions who are open to multiple gods, multiple disciplines within the religion, are taken seriously when it comes to reincarnation?
Well, I mean, the Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation. The Buddhist concept, first of all, is extremely fuzzy, and they will admit they don't really know how it works.
Right.
And they think they can reincarnate it as insects, which is crazy.
Why is that crazy? Why is that crazy? Why is it crazy to imagine that if we can be reincarnated into another person, that we cannot be reincarnated into another species?
Well, first of all, nobody has proof one way or the other. But I do have the advantage of working with a spirit guide for the last, 17 years, and we've gone over this many times. So the soul incarnates to grow. And as I mentioned, you come back pretty much the same as you were before, and you incarnate to continue to develop and advance. Well, you're not going to advance very much by being a grasshopper.
No, but if it's good for one species, I don't understand the logic behind where it's selective species programming. That makes no sense.
Well, I've made my statement. Nobody knows for sure, but in my work with Kevin Ryerson and Atun Ray. Atun Ray has indicated multiple times we do not incarnate as animals. And that's all I really can say about it.
But do animals reincarnate as other animals?
Animals, the way it works is that if an animal develops an emotional attachment to a human being, like our pets, those pets can continue on with us in the spirit world and can reincarnate with us. Whether they can change species, I don't really know, but I believe in general it's pretty much, dogs come back as dogs and so forth.
In today's society, Doctor, there are so many people who are trying to show one way or another that life continues after death. You've got ghost hunters, you've got people who claim to be mediums, psychics, channels, and the list goes on and on and on. A great number of these have been proven over time to be charlatans. So how does a member of the public listening tonight get a grasp on what reincarnation is when yourself, a doctor, can't explain it?
Well, I think I've been explaining it. You're asking me a question that doesn't have an answer. You're asking me how mechanically does reincarnation work?
Well, doesn't that make you want to know that answer as well?
Well, yes, but something. As I've mentioned, I have discussed these questions with Atun Ray, and I've written a book called Origin of the Soul and the Purpose of Reincarnation, based on my dialogues with a highly intelligent spirit being. And that's the best information that I have. And that does explain, when souls were created, why we reincarnate, and when it ends. I don't really know what more I can tell you.
I don't understand, and maybe this is just my way of thinking, why you would take so much credence from a spirit instead of going to the members of the scientific community and trying to better understand this phenomenon.
Well, I will tell you exactly. First of all, the information that you can get from science involves data, like I've explained, involving young children who have spontaneous memories of past lives that can be objectively validated. That is the state of the art of reincarnation research.
All right, Doctor, I hate to do this, but we've just run out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I am not a believer. I do not buy into this whatsoever. It bothers me that a member of the scientific community, a medical doctor, goes to a spirit to get his information on something that should be investigated deeply by the medical community as well as the scientific community, if in fact it is to be proved to be legitimate. I just don't understand it. I don't buy it. But if you'd like further information, X-Zone Nation, it's reincarnationresearch.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.